Hello everyone, thank you for coming to look at my final project for learning skills and mindsets. I want to start off my first slide with just a graphic that is very common, I'm sure many of you have seen it around, on growth mindset. So it asks the students, which step have you reached today? And especially in math, I see this constantly is, I won't do it. So there are a lot of friends who are at the bottom step or they're at the I can't do it. And our ultimate goal is to get them to the yes, I did it, on top. So coming into 5th grade, many students and their parents have certain beliefs. And the beliefs are that they're either math students or they're not. They're either a math person or I'm going to fail. And they tell me that on the first day. They'll come in and they'll say, Mrs. Morse, but I'm not a math person, and my dad wasn't a math person either, or my mom wasn't a math person. And I say, okay, well, you're not a math person yet. A lot of parents think with the new Common Core modules that come out that it's impossible for their children to learn, and they're really incapable of helping them due to the new processes that it presents. And they really think that if students just keep practicing with many different examples, they would learn it if they just keep practicing it. And in some cases that's true, and sometimes they need more than just a couple different examples. I really had to think about what I wanted for my classroom. And what I ultimately wanted was to create an environment in which all students were pushed toward their highest potential. However, we all know students come to school with a large variety of background knowledge and capabilities. Not every child is going to be on the same exact page on the same exact day. But in traditional schools, we often have it set up as schedules of this is the lesson we're on this given day, whether the kids are ready for it or not. The intervention that I wanted to put in place was to create an environment in which students could move through the material at their own pace, progressing as they show mastery of this needed skills. So, if little Johnny could show mastery on the first day, he could move on to his independent work, while little Billy, he needed a little bit more time. It gave them their own individual pace to really do what was best for them and most challenging. The first thing I needed to do was to explore the difference between a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. Many of the students and their families had a fixed mindset when they came into math. They were either a math person or they were not a math person. When moving to a growth mindset, we often just added the word yet onto the end of our statements. For example, we might say, I'm not very good at multiplication yet. I'm not very good at it. But by adding that yet, it shows the focus on improvement and growth instead of on a set ability. By just saying, I'm not good at multiplication, they kind of pigeonhole themselves into never having the chance to be better. And no one wants that. So by adding that word yet, it opened up all of these brand new doors for kids to learn and improve. So how did I do it? Well, first I started off with doing small groups based on skill instruction only. Sometimes these skill groups were the same for the entire week, sometimes just for that day. It was really based on the skill and how many students were struggling with that skill. My groups had to be really fluid. They had to change, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly, depending on how long it took for skill mastery. Some students needed to go to multiple groups in the same day to really lock in that knowledge. Well, anytime you have students working in small groups, everyone wants to know, what are the other students doing? Well, I had to come up with some leveled instructional videos for that. So I looked on things like BrainPop and Khan Academy to help students to have multiple attempts to taking in different skill knowledge. I also found a really cool program called Front Row that has students taking an online test for about 10 minutes and then creates their own game pathway to really focus on those skills. The great thing about that is I could check their progress after they left or at home or even on the weekends with their Front Row teacher part. It was really great because I could see what things the kids were still struggling with and what things they had already mastered. Now, anytime you change the scheduling or the flexibility of your schedule, you have to think about due dates. So in my classroom, I had to kind of get away from the fact that They weren't all going to turn in the same stuff on the same day, which makes grading a little bit challenging, but it's really what's best for them. So sometimes little Billy's due date was 3 days different than little Tommy's due date. It really depended on when they were able to show mastery of the skills. I had to come up with extension projects for kids that really were able to master skills quickly and really need to expand them into the higher thinking levels. I also had to think about my testing because not every student was going to be able to test on the same exact day, so I had flexible testing dates. I also had 2 options for the kids. If they took the test and completely bombed it, they could request to retest, which was to start all over, brand new, start from scratch, fresh start, and take the test again. Or they could do corrections and get half credit back on the ones that they did wrong. Again, the focus being on this growth mindset, not a one and done, but continuing to better yourself. My findings were actually pretty amazing. I found that when students were in charge of their own learning, they became more invested in their product. Therefore, the work they were turning in was much better quality than they had previously submitted. They really cared about what they were doing. They were pushing themselves to be better students and turn in better work because of it. I think because we were using the growth mindset, the pressure was lessened for the students who were struggling. They didn't have to keep up with their peers that were moving so much faster than them, so they didn't feel defeated. They were going at their own pace, growing every day on the skills that they were struggling with. While the more advanced students, they weren't bored because they weren't being held behind by their peers. They could push themselves to new levels. It's important that when you're in education, you share things. So I had to think about how was I going to share this with my peers. I started by sharing information at grade level team meetings, the ones that meet twice a week, with just my 5th grade team. Then I thought, well, maybe I could bring it to curriculum teams that meet every month. And then maybe to the roundtable meetings where the whole school meets every other week for about 30 minutes. That might be a good information session for them. But really, ultimately, the best way to show this is to have colleagues actually come into my classroom and see this in action. Because no matter how good it looks on paper or how great the presentation is, until someone sees how the kids are moving through it and what they're doing, the buy-in is not going to be as great. I really want to push this next year even more into creating individualized playlists per skills for the students to be able to move through in a more fluid manner.